Americans who are against the Biden student loan forgiveness. Why? I don't disagree with it per se, but without setting up systems to keep school costs in check, we will get this crisis to reoccur every few years as college costs keep skyrocketing. Before federal student loans were guaranteed, college was nowhere near this expensive. Yes, very much a treatment of the symptom, not the cause. Good point. Edit, Fayu, and so I don't have to respond to a ton of people. I was simply agreeing with the fact that it isn't treating the underlying issue. I'm absolutely in favor of loan forgiveness, however. I agree. Education should never be for profit. It's gonna be like healthcare, where the schools will just gouge prices since the government will pay for them, and should be negotiating them lower. Loan forgiveness doesn't make sense unless you also stop giving out the loans. Universities were able to increase their tuition so much because everyone's getting guaranteed student loans. And now you're putting down precedent that the loans can be forgiven. Does that sound wise to you? I'm against it as a solution because schools will still charge $100 Gaia and lenders will still keep making ridiculous loans. Yep, the debt is a symptom. The problem is the extremely large expense that has scaled far more than the rate of inflation. Fix the problem, not the symptom. It's not the solution, though. Everyone seems to think that Biden is just forgiving loans and then washing his hands of the process. Future plans involve free tuition for trade schools and community colleges, as well as addressing the current student loan process, that has inflated these costs. Taps. Joe Biden, come beyond. Yes, ultimately, this is actually a giveaway to higher education, not students. However, we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, or we'd never accomplish anything. It's a start, and if we can get this done, a better Congress, Supreme Court, and President in the future might get some real reform done. Edit for those who don't understand the first comment. The theory is that schools see the government paying off $20,000 of loans means they can now raise tuition by that same amount going forward, because if it can be done once, it can be done again once. It can be done again. Band-aid solution, while better than nothing, does not solve any of the root causes of the crisis, which is the unchecked guaranteed loaning practice paired with sizable interest rate. It is worth noting that the forgiveness was coupled with a change to income-driven repayment plans. Basically, they are now capped at 5 of discretionary income. Less of your total income is considered discretionary income. The difference between your monthly payment and accrued interest is subsidized, so your balance never increases, and your loans are forgiven after 10 years of repayment, not 20. Huge win for people who have loans that are suffocating them. What I'm worried about is if this isn't at some point followed up with addressing ballooning tuition rates at public universities. If colleges take this as a green light to charge more because students are more willing to borrow because more of it will be forgiven, then we could, in theory, just end up back where we started, except now students are resorting to private loans because federal loans won't cover the entire cost of tuition. Into details. This is separate from self and was updated at the same time as the tank forgiveness announcement. Correction. Loans are forgiven after 20 years of IJA, not 10. I was mixing it up with slip. The root cause of the crisis is the cost of public universities. If the actual student loan program were re-evaluated, loan forgiveness wouldn't be an issue. Re-evaluating future loans wouldn't address the existing loans. I think cutting the interest to one makes more sense, and stop the damn schools from instituting ridiculous tuition increases. My state school was $3,000 a semester when I went there. Adjusted for inflation, that should be $5,500 now. For some unfathomable reason, it's $18,000 now. For some unfathomable reason, it's $18,000. Students are getting hosed. I only disagree with it because it doesn't address the fundamental problem with these loans, which is the predatory interest rates that make them damn near impossible to pay off. The government should be regulating those rates so students aren't being gouged and can actually pay the loans off with reasonable interest. Edit. Just want to clarify, I'm pro-loan relief. I just wish more was being done to address the core issue with these loans. But I would rather the government do something instead of continuing to do nothing. It also doesn't address college costs. The cost of higher education has far outpaced inflation for decades. This is especially problematic for public universities. Tie cost increases to inflation. In New Zealand, you only generate interest on your student loan if you leave the country to work. Otherwise, you don't generate interest on it. Have you actually reviewed what Biden's proposal includes? You can view the fact sheet here. Here are a few quick points. Income-driven loan repayment will be reduced from 10s of discretionary income to 5 of discretionary income. The government will cover any unpaid interest if the borrower's payment doesn't cover all of the interest, so the loan balance doesn't grow, even if their payment amount is $0 because of low income. Forgive unpaid loan balance after 10 years of payments for loan balances of $12 or less. Expands the current SLAF program to include a larger group of public servants eligible for student loan forgiveness. While it doesn't completely do away with outrageous interest rates, it's a great step in the right direction. Corrected the second bullet point. It doesn't fix the problem, which is the absurd cost. Forgiving debt probably makes it much worse, as future students are going to think they too will eventually get their loans forgiven, making them willing to spend even more. The largest benefits go to people solidly in or on their way to being among the higher earners in our country. It will exacerbate resentment of the less well-educated who already feel they get a raw deal, further polarizing our society. I think these issues could be addressed with more thoughtful programs. I'd forgive interest only and make future loans interest-free. But I'd also cap costs at the institution level, not just borrowing limits or costs paid by students, but an all-in cap that includes all tax dollars and tuition, and I'd place some default risk back on the institution. I'd make tuition and student loan payments tax deductible and require institutions to use their endowments to reduce costs further. I'd expand the entire program to vocational education, because it won't change the more profit mindset of the college system at all, and will maybe even make it worse in the very near future. Yes, it'll help tons of people now, but next year, problem not solved. I'm against it because the government are speaking out of both sides of their mouth. If student debt was so bad that it should be forgiven, then why are the same loans being made to new students now? I'd have some capacity for the idea if it was done after the government putting an end to any new student loans. But that's not the case. At the end of the day, the student promised to pay the debt back, so they should do so. I know this is not a popular view, but it's quite an important moral in my view. That's not to mention that the taxpayer is going to be picking up the tab for this anyway, which is hardly a good idea when we struggle as a nation, financially as it is. Wasn't this asked like 2 days ago? It doesn't solve the core problems with the education system being overly expensive for what it provides. The burden of paying just gets passed on to the taxpayer, which is the middle class, because the rich can just use their money to avoid paying much of their taxes. Make the banks pay for charging excess interest, or the schools pay for giving out B's degrees that no one will hire. It is inflationary in nature. Think of what you'll do when your loan is forgiven with the new money. Now multiply it by the millions more who will be doing that same thing. You really think you'll be able to get that new car or down payment on a house when every other person with their newly forgiven loans are doing the same thing? It is unfair for the people who paid their own way through school or already paid their loan. I'm not going to get a refund for working part-time through school to pay for my education when I could have parted instead. Yet, the inflation and taxes will affect me. Ultimately, I think it's just a bad policy. It preys on voters thinking that this will just solve all of their problems when it really won't. I'm fine with the interest being forgiven, or a good portion of it, but you weren't forced to take out the loans. That was a choice. You are responsible for your choices and debts, not the taxpayer. The real issue is, let's make education more affordable. It's blatantly unconstitutional. The executive branch doesn't have the authority to unilaterally spend hundreds of billions of dollars on a student loan bailout. Putting aside if this is good policy or not, this needs to go through Congress. Former Speaker Pelosi was correct. President doesn't have this authority. Using an obscure 2003 law designed to forgive student loans for military service members whose education was disrupted during Iraq War to blanket bail out millions of student loans is a clear overstep. Furthermore, the law required there be an ongoing emergency for jurisdiction. Doge already claimed during immigration proceedings that pandemic phase was over. Joe Biden has already gone on national TV and said pandemic was over. Can't claim we are, and are not currently, in an ongoing emergency to justify activating an obscure law orders of magnitude beyond its intended scope. The bailouts aren't paid for. It's just going to add hundreds of billions to national debt. A debt that our children will eventually have to pay off. Why should my 2-year-old daughter and 11-day-old son be responsible for paying off your poor economic decisions to get a low-yield degree and an unmarketable fee? The bailouts do nothing to address the underlying cause of tuition inflation. With opening the box of bailing out student loan debt as a new potential mechanic in play, tuitions would likely be raised further as we are disincentivizing going into debt, as there's this looming possibility of a bailout coming, and once something happens once, maybe again. It's a wealth transfer mechanic from working people to benefit upper middle class. Why should a car mechanic be responsible for paying down or take on a portion of national debt for a nurse practitioner who is in a position to pay back their debt? It's just robbing from the poorer to give to the richer. There are already laws in place to discharge student loan debts from fraudulent colleges and universities. During these talks, we hear people cite cases like Tech and other predatory colleges lying about their stats and accreditation to get student enrollment. It's a blatant mistruth. Students who attended these colleges are already eligible for discharging their student loans as the colleges committed fraud. What we are discussing here are people who got degrees which may not be marketable, but nobody hid that information from them or lied to them. I got a bachelor's degree in psyche. That wasn't a great decision, but also nobody else is responsible for that decision but me. If we are going to start bailing people out for making bad financial decisions, when do I get my bailout check for buying $500 of GameStop stock? Being an adult means that you have the freedom to make your own life's decisions, but you are also responsible for the consequences of those decisions. Edit. Came home to 63 notifications and 1 person reporting my comment for self-harm. Can we please just be mature enough to not report people for mental health resources just because that person disagreed with you? Are we really that fragile? I mostly agree with student loan forgiveness, but this is a very well-described counter, and it's made me at least willing to rethink and re-examine my position. Thanks for this. Aren't points 1 and 2 commonly used for corporations though? Banks were bailed out, and the situation was 100 their fault to begin with. Why should I have to pay for them? At least paying off student debt is paying off a debt for people who are trying to better themselves. Corporate bailouts serve nobody but those at the very, very top. You made a lot of good points, but A4 is factually incorrect. Per here, HATEPS, her tax foundation, org publications, latest federal income, tax data in bottom 50 of earners, pay only 2.3 of earners, pay only 2.3s of federal individual income tax. I think you can improve your point simply by saying that vocational programs are mostly left out of the deal. Because those people signed up to repay a loan, they did so with their full faculties, and they need to own up to their responsibilities and act like adults.